on their mortgage payments and was in danger of foreclosure. Lola Baldwin recognized Mix Parker's struggles and pushed back the foreclosure date twice. But the time passed and no payment came. August 13th, the foreclosure date was nearing. On August 9th, 3 days before Mix Parker's balance was due, the Dolesville branch was robbed at gunpoint. Next, on August 11th, the other bank branch was robbed by the same robber and was in danger. In total, the masked robber took about $8,000 in small bills stashed in a paper bag. The day after the second robbery, Bronnie Parker walked into the Dolesville branch and handed Lola Baldwin a check for $5,212.14, the exact balance due. Was robbed at gunpoint. The defendant was desperate. Next, on August 11th, they were going to lose their home. So Mix Parker took matters into their own hands. Their job as a security technician gave them insight on the bank's layout and the workings of its security. The day after the second robbery, in this trial, you will hear Lola Baldwin testify that in late 2020, the defendant scheduled for the camera updates of the bank, which were the exact days of the two robberies, causing them to have no video footage. Mix Parker found a way out and took it. In doing so, the defendant left a trail which Detective Elliot Kress followed. Lola Baldwin provided the detective with a robber description that matched Mix Parker. Baldwin also identified the getaway car as a blue sedan, the same car that Mix Parker drives. Members of the jury, the defense will try to convince you that Mix Parker sold their car to pay their debt. But Detective Kress will show you that Mix Parker still has the title and still owns the car. You will also hear from Allie Pinkerton, a computer forensics specialist. She followed the tracker placed in the robber's bag. It led to the exit by Chalmers Casino, the very casino that Mix Parker went to after both of the robberies. Members of the jury, the floor manager of the casino, Pat Hurst, will testify that Mix Parker came to gamble with thousands of dollars worth of small bills in a paper bag, exactly what the robber had escaped with. Pat Hurst will also testify that Mix Parker arrived in the clothes the robber was wearing. Members of the jury, it all adds up. Mix Parker was running out of time. They knew they had to get the money somehow, or they would lose their house. And it's obvious what the defendant chose. Because the next day, Mix Parker walked into the bank holding a check with the exact balance due. So let's add it up. Bronnie Parker had the motivation, the means, the desperation, and the knowledge to commit these crimes. We, the prosecution, will prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty on 2 counts of robbery in the first degree. And after all the evidence you'll be presented with today, the prosecution is confident that you, the jury, will add it all up. Bronnie Parker is guilty. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Stoltling. Opening statement for the defense.
Your Honor, members of the jury, my name is Diwa Rahim, and it is my honor to be representing Bronnie Parker this evening. The defendant stands here falsely accused of robbery in the first degree, 2 very serious crimes. At the conclusion of this case, we will ask for a verdict of not guilty. Members of the jury, tonight you will hear of a simple case, one of a mistaken identity. Bronnie Parker has had a tough go of it in life, having no option but to make ends meet ever since she was young. The prosecution will try to use that fact against Ms. Parker. We urge you to see beyond these cherry-picked facts and stereotypes. The prosecution will bring evidence to the table, but the fact of the matter is, there is no video surveillance footage of Ms. Parker robbing these banks, no witness statements stating that they directly saw her, and no fingerprints. And so I ask you, does it sound like Bronnie Parker committed these crimes? There are many sides to every story. Tonight, the prosecution will tell you theirs, while the defense will detail what really happened, the truth. The defense will call 3 witnesses to the stand. First, Bronnie Parker. Ms. Parker will attest to winning the money for the mortgage at the casino and the haste in which she was arrested. Next, Pat Hurst, the floor manager at the casino. Ms. Hurst will tell us how good of a player Bronnie Parker is and how calm she was the night of the supposed robberies, unlike the behavior of someone who actually just robbed 2 banks. Finally, Dolroy Mapp, a private investigator and recipient of a certificate in GPS and location technology. Ms. Mapp will tell us how she accessed Bronnie Parker's Google accounts and found zero data that Bronnie Parker was anywhere near the banks when the robberies occurred. All 3 witness statements point to one obvious answer, that Ms. Parker did not commit these crimes. The state has the burden of proof tonight. That means they must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Ms. Parker is guilty. Members of the jury, in order to find my client guilty, it is not a 50-50 decision where you lean slightly towards one side or the other. You must be convinced to a moral certainty that Bronnie Parker committed this crime in order to find my client guilty. The defense today will show you how Bronnie Parker committing these crimes is a complete rush to judgment. Bronnie Parker did not commit these crimes. The prosecution's case is built upon faulty evidence that does not logically connect Ms. Parker to this case. At the conclusion of this case, we will ask for a verdict of not guilty, as that is the only fair verdict in this trial. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rom. For the plaintiff, your first witness. Oh, I'm sorry, 30 seconds for the judges. We'll take a short 30-second break so they can get caught up with their scores. Okay, plaintiff's first witness.
Your Honor, the prosecution calls Lolo Baldwin to the stand. Good evening, Mr. Baldwin. Why are you here today?
Good evening. My name is Lolo Baldwin. I am the local manager of the Dolesville branch of the Cascade Community Bank, and I am here to talk about the 9th.
I believe you cut out, Mr. Baldwin. Could you please repeat your answer to the question of why you're here today?
Yes, I'm so sorry. I'm having connectivity issues.
No worries.
Yeah, like I was saying, I am the manager of the local branch of the Cascade Community Bank. So I'm here to talk about the robbery that I witnessed on Monday the 9th.
And what do you remember about the first robbery on the 9th?
Well, we opened it around 9 a.m. and the robber came in pretty much immediately after we opened. And they were wearing a black hoodie and black gloves and a black mask, and then also blue jeans and white sneakers. And they came in and pointed a gun directly at my chest, and threw me a paper bag with a printed note that said, "Put all the money behind the counter in the bag."
Did you?
I mean, so I had much of a choice, right? I need to keep everything safe. So I went behind the counter and I did as the note said.
About how much money was in the bag?
I'm sorry, I think I'm cutting out. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
About how much money was in the bag?
I would estimate that it was a little over $3,000, and it was all in small bills.
Okay. And then what happened?
Well, I went back to the counter, and the robber snatched the bag from me, and both I unfortunately was not able to catch the license plate up, but it was definitely a blue suit.
Did you call the police?
Yeah, after the robber left, I hit the button under the teller's counter to alert the local Cascade Community Sheriff's Office.
All right, and who came after you alerted the authorities?
Detective Elliot Kress.
Did you speak to Kress?
I did, yeah. I basically told him everything that I've told you here today, along with, I let him know that there was not any security footage of what took place.
All right, let's take a step back. Do you know the defendant, Miss Parker?
Yeah, I do. Bronnie was actually a security tech at Doing Security, and she managed the bank's security systems for a number of years.
What does it mean that Miss Parker would manage the security systems for the bank?
It basically just means that she would come in every couple of months, look at the security cameras, suggest any changes or updates she thought needed to be made.
Was that her only connection to the bank?
Oh, no. She was also a client. She, in 2018, came into my office and asked if I would help her take out a mortgage on her dream home. And, of course, I was happy to help out.
Was Miss Parker consistent with her mortgage payments?
Well, she made her payments up until February of 2021, but in March, received any payment from her.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? It just cut out.
Yes, I'm sorry. I was saying she made her payments through February of 2021, but in March, we did not receive a payment from her.
And did you try to reach out to Miss Parker?
Yeah, I gave her a call, but I was, surprised and disappointed to find that the line had been disconnected.
So did you make any other attempts to reach her at all?
Well, after she had missed 2 more payments, I was starting to get really worried. So I actually drove down to her house just to check in.
Did you get a chance to talk to her?
Yeah, she was there at the time. She let me know that she had lost her job at Doing Security back in January and that she was really struggling with money. And, I let her know that foreclosure would normally begin on 120 days of non-payment, but she was going through a really hard time and I wanted to help out where I could. So I pushed it back a month. So it was on July 1st.
All right, and did Miss Parker make the July 1st payment?
Unfortunately, no.
Your Honor, my co-counsel is now screen sharing what has been previously marked as Exhibit 4. Thank you, co-counsel. Mr. Baldwin, can you please identify this exhibit?
Yeah, that is the letter that I mailed Bronnie Parker about the foreclosure.
Your Honor, at this time, I request that Exhibit 4 be entered into evidence. Its authenticity has been stipulated.
Any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
Thank you, it's received.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Baldwin, what did you say in the foreclosure letter?
Well, you can see right there, it basically just says that foreclosure was scheduled to begin on August 3rd if Bronnie had not made
I apologize. I believe
sorry,
it just
am I cutting
cut
out?
out again. Could you repeat your answer to that question, Mr. Baldwin?
Yeah, it just, I mailed it to Bronnie to let them know, as you can see, that foreclosure was scheduled to begin on August 13th if she had not made her payment in full by August 12th.
And how much did Miss Parker owe?
She owed $5,212.14.
Is that amount addressed in the letter that's being screen shared right now?
At the bottom of the first paragraph.
All right. Thank you, co-counsel. You may stop screen sharing now. Mr. Baldwin, I'd like to touch on something you mentioned earlier. You said that you told Detective Kress earlier that there was no video footage of the robbery. Why was that?
Well, during the time of the robbery, our security cameras were actually out. They were being updated. It was actually Bronnie Parker who had scheduled the updates.
I just want to make sure that I'm understanding correctly. Are you saying that Miss Baldwin or Miss Parker scheduled for the cameras to be off at that time?
Yes, she scheduled for both banks, so there wasn't any security footage of either.
Okay. And did you ever hear from Miss Parker again?
I did, yeah. She came into the bank 3 days after our Dolesville branch robbery.
Why did she stop by?
Well, she actually had the money to pay off her mortgage, and she came by to give me the check.
Your Honor, my co-counsel is now retrieving what's been previously marked as Exhibit 2. Mr. Baldwin, can you please identify this exhibit?
Yeah, I can. That's the check that Bronnie Parker handed me on August 12th, 2021.
Your Honor, I request Exhibit 2 be entered into evidence. Its authenticity has been stipulated.
Any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
Thank you. It's received.
Thank you, Your Honor. Co-counsel, you may stop screen sharing now. Mr. Baldwin, how much was the check made out for?
It was made out for $5,212.14.
Was that the same amount we addressed in the foreclosure letter earlier?
Yeah, I mean, it's the exact same amount down to the penny.
Okay, and remind me again, when was Miss Parker's balance due?
It was due on August 12th, which was the back day that she brought it in.
And did Miss Parker tell you where she came up with that money?
I actually asked about it, and she said that she had a lucky night at the casino. That didn't really quite add up to me, I'm going to be honest.
Why didn't it add up to you?
A handful of reasons, actually. One was that she had a very intimate knowledge with the bank and specifically its security, along with the fact that I knew that she was in a time of significant financial hardship. And the robber that I saw actually had a very similar height and build to Bronnie Parker.
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation.
Your response?
Your Honor, under Rule 701A, Mr. Baldwin can give a rationally based opinion on his perception.
Any further on that objection?
No.
Thank you. The objection is overruled. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Baldwin, did you have anything else to say, or were you done?
No, that was it.
All right, so what did you do with your suspicion?
I called Detective Kress and let the bank collected the check as evidence.
Thank you, Mr. Baldwin. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Cross.
Mr. Baldwin, you've known Miss Parker since about 2016.
Yeah, about around then.
And you liked Miss Parker well enough.
Yeah, I mean, she came in, she did her job, she did it well. I didn't know her particularly well.
But you liked her enough so to help her get a loan? I believe you cut out.
I'm sorry, Susan, can you repeat the question?
And you liked her enough.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yes, of course. And you liked her well enough to help her get a loan.
I mean, yeah, it's actually a big thing that we pride our bank, the Cascade Community Bank prides itself on.
Thank you. I appreciate that. You answered my question. And you actually went out on a limb to help her get a loan, correct?
Yeah, I wanted to help out. I mean, she said it was her dream home.
Sure. And Miss Parker had been let go from their job around March, right?
I believe she told me it was January, but yeah.
And right up until then, Miss Parker had been steadily making her monthly payments. I think you cut out. Do you need me to repeat the question?
I think we may have lost Mr. Carpenter. Ms. Stolting, could you perhaps send him an instant message? Oh, there he is. Mr. Carpenter, you're back.
Sorry, I'm so sorry for the inconvenience.
It's quite all right.
my
No, we
Wi-Fi is
understand.
very
Yeah,
finicky.
we have all been through it. So we appreciate your patience, and let Ms. Brodall continue with her cross.
Thank you, Your Honor. And let's see, right up until about March, Ms. Parker had been slowly making their monthly payments.
Yes, she missed her first payment in March.
And losing a job can explain why a customer might miss a payment, right?
I mean, yeah, if you don't have an income, it's pretty hard to keep up consistent payment.
Right. And Ms. Parker isn't the first customer to miss a payment.
No, not at all.
Yeah, it's fairly common, isn't it?
Yeah, we see it a lot.
Yeah. Now let's turn to your description of Ms. Parker. You can't say with certainty that the robber was Ms. Parker, right?
I mean, the robber was wearing a mask, so no, I can't say it with absolute 100% certainty. I did feel
right. And the clothes you described, those are commonly owned clothes, right?
Yeah, they are.
You'd agree that many people own blue jeans.
Yes, they do.
And you'd also agree with me that many people own white sneakers too.
Yeah.
And let's switch over to the things, to your memory of the robbery. You weren't sure that the bills Ms. Parker gave you were the same ones behind your counter. Isn't that correct?
I mean, there's no way to know for sure. No.
Right.
Ms. Parker actually gave me a check, not.
My apologies, the check.
Yeah.
And when Ms. Parker handed you that check, saying that she got it from the casino, you had no suspicions of anything suspicious at the time?
I mean, my first reaction was to be happy for her, of course.
Right. I mean, after all, Ms. Parker seemed as normal as can be.
Yes, I would say so.
Now, you've been pointing the finger at Ms. Parker today, but isn't it true that she isn't the only person you believe committed this crime?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? My internet is cutting out once again.
Yes, of course. Now, you've been pointing the finger at Ms. Parker today, but isn't it true that she isn't the only person you believe committed this crime?
Can you hear me? Am I back?
You're back.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes. Now, you've been pointing the finger at Ms. Parker today, but isn't it true that she isn't the only person you believe committed the crime?
I fully believe.
However, at the time of the robbery, right after, you had your suspicions about other people. Isn't that correct?
I mean, I suppose I did.
Right. And isn't it true that you were also wondering if the robber was Johnny, your own bank's assistant manager?
Johnny was a victim in this crime. I truly do not believe that he could have been involved in it.
However, at the time, you had your suspicions about him.
I did have brief suspicions, yes.
Right. And going back to the whole, you cannot say with moral certainty that the robber was Miss Parker. Isn't that correct?
I suppose so.
And we want to be completely certain with an accusation such as this, don't we?
I mean, I just felt that it was, it's obviously a heavy accusation to give. I felt that there was enough evidence that at the very least I should bring it up to Detective Kress, just so he had all the information that could be useful for the case for him to do what he would with.
But you had your doubts, isn't that correct?
I mean, obviously the robber was wearing a mask, but I do truly believe that it was Bronnie Parker.
And we don't want to have any doubts, do we?
No, I suppose not.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Baldwin, to be clear, upon reflection, do you think Johnny Connolly could have been the robber at all?
No, not at all. Like I said, Johnny was with me during the time of the robbery, and he was a victim in all this. I truly don't see him being involved in it.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Plaintiff's next witness. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me give 30 seconds for our judges to get caught up. Apologies. I'll get this down. All right, plaintiff's second witness.
Your Honor, before we call our second witness, I would like to ask under Rule 13 that more time be added to the clock for both sides due to the connectivity issues of the last witness.
I think that's fair. Timekeepers, do you have a suggestion on the amount of time that should be added? I'm thinking maybe 2 minutes. Does that sound fair?
Yes, Your Honor.
And for TI, 2 minutes? Okay, it looks like we're adding 2 minutes, Mr. Selnick.
Thank you, Your Honor. The prosecution now calls Detective Elliot Kress to the stand. Good evening, Detective Kress.
Good evening.
Could you explain for the jury how you're connected to this case?
Yes, I'm a detective for the CCSO, or the Cascade County Sheriff's Office. I investigated Bronnie Parker and the Cascade Community Bank robberies on August 9th and 11th.
What qualifications do you have as a detective?
Well, I've always been interested in detective work, so after high school I got a bachelor's degree in sociology, but with a strong focus on criminology and penology. About a year after I graduated, I was hired by the CCSO as a patrol officer.
And how long have you worked there at the CCSO?
Well, after a decade successfully as a patrol officer, with continued training, of course, I was promoted to a detective, and I've been a detective for 12 years now, so I have over 2 decades of daily experience working with criminals and criminal investigation in my line of work.
Your Honor, at this time, I'd ask that the court recognize Detective Kress as an expert in the fields of criminology and criminal investigation.
Any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
Okay, yeah, he's an expert. Go ahead.
Moving on, let's talk about the actual robberies. How did you get involved with this case?
Well, on the morning of August 9th, I was notified of a robbery at the Dillsville branch of the Cascade Community Bank. I drove there as fast as I could and got there about a half hour later.
And what did you do once you got there?
Well, I interviewed the 2 bank tellers first. That's Lola Baldwin and Johnny Connolly.
How were these witnesses composed when you interviewed them?
Well, Mr. Baldwin, although he was a little shaken, he seemed very calm to me and answered all of my questions clearly. Mr. Connolly, though, was the opposite. He stuttered through everything he said, and he couldn't seem to focus. It was clear to me that his recollection of the robbery wouldn't be as reliable or, able to depend upon as Mr. Baldwin's.
Objection and proper witness opinion. The witness isn't qualified to give opinions on the psychological state of the witness.
Your response, Mr. Selnick?
Yes, Your Honor. Detective Kress was just entered as an expert in criminal investigation, and the subject of criminal investigation would include knowing the psychology of different witnesses after a robbery.
Anything further, Ms. Villette?
Yes, the witness has no qualifications in psychology specifically. The witness is not a psychologist.
nor does their background have anything to do with psychology or their education.
Mr. Selnick, remind me again of the specific question that you put to Detective Kress.
I asked how the witnesses were composed when he interviewed them at the robberies.
Okay, so I'm going to overrule the objection. I think the question is directed to what he observed rather than any psychological diagnoses. So on that basis, you may continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. We have heard Mr. Baldwin testify in court just a moment ago to the events of the robbery. How does that compare to what they told you at the scene?
It's exactly the same thing that Mr. Baldwin told me at the scene of the crime. Basically, it's that the robber came in just after the bank opened, holding a silver handgun, and had them put money in his paper bag. The robber got away with around $3,000 in small bills.
And did you hear any descriptions of the robber?
Yeah, Mr. Baldwin, he told me the same things that I've heard him say today in court, that the robber was wearing white shoes, jeans, a dark hoodie, a black mask, and black gloves. He also gave a physical description of the robber, which is actually similar to the build of who I now know to be Bronnie Parker. Mr. Connolly's description wasn't exactly the same, but again, Mr. Baldwin just seemed a lot more certain of his description when he gave it to me.
Thank you. And was there anything else significant at the bank?
There wasn't much of anything else that I could use. The robber was wearing gloves, so he left no fingerprints, and Mr. Baldwin explained that the camera systems had been deactivated.
So at this point, what were your main leads that you had to follow?
Well, my main lead at that point was the blue sedan that the witnesses described, and the descriptions of the robber themselves.
Thank you, Detective Kress. Now, let's move on to the day of the second robbery. How did you hear about that robbery?
Well, I was alerted to another robbery nearby. This time a robbery at the other branch of the Cascade Community Bank. Actually, it was pretty weird. I mean, it's not every day you see both branches of a bank get robbed a few days apart.
So, how did you start your investigation there?
Well, there were a few witnesses there, and I started by talking with one of the tellers, Chris Perucci. He seemed a bit rattled to me. He was breathing into a paper bag when I arrived, and he said he couldn't believe what had just happened.
What was it that Mr. Perucci was able to tell you?
Well, as far as his physical description of the robber, it actually lined up with Mr. Baldwin's, being the same build as Ms. Parker. But more importantly, he told me that he'd managed to slip a GPS tracker into the robber's bag.
How did you go about locating this device?
Well, I immediately contacted my colleague, Allie Pinkerton, the CCSO's computer forensics specialist. She tracked the robber, and I went after them as they drove down Interstate 4.
Were you able to find the tracker?
Yeah, I was able to find the tracker, but unfortunately, a little bit before I caught up with the car, the tracker actually came to a stop. I ended up finding it discarded on the side of the road, right next to an exit ramp, which I noticed led directly into the parking lot of Chalmers Casino.
So, was there anything else of note that followed this?
Well, not a whole lot. Like last time, there wasn't any other physical evidence left behind at the bank, and the other witnesses didn't have any other new information to tell me.
So, how did you continue with your investigation after all of this?
Well, actually, the next day, Mr. Baldwin called me and told me everything that I just heard him say in court about Ms. Parker. And after that conversation, and after inspecting the check that Ms. Parker delivered, the evidence I had gathered just seemed to add up. And I was a bit suspicious of Ms. Parker myself. She seemed like a very good match to the evidence that I'd gathered.
What made Ms. Parker such a good match?
Well, like I said before, the banks that were robbed, it was pretty weird. It seemed pretty random at first. There's not a lot of money at those banks anyways, but Ms. Parker actually has specific ties to that bank. And along with that, the descriptions that I received of the robbery lined up with Ms. Parker. She had motive too. Ms. Parker needed to pay off her mortgage on her house that exact week.
Were you ever able to talk to Ms. Parker yourself?
Yes, I was. After that call, I drove to Ms. Parker's house to ask her a few questions. I mean, I'd never want to arrest someone or go that far without at least getting their side of the story, obviously.
How did she react to seeing you there at her house?
Well, she seemed pretty defensive to me right off the bat. I mean, before I even had a chance to introduce myself.
So, what did you ask her about first?
Well, after identifying myself, I asked her a few questions about a light blue sedan. That's the car that witnesses saw driving away from the robberies. I asked her if she'd seen a similar one in the area. She hesitantly told me that she had owned a similar car, but she said that she'd actually sold it a few days prior.
Did she give you any details about the car sale?
No, no details at all. Actually, she told me that even though it was only a few days ago, the person she'd sold it to, she couldn't remember anything about them.
Interesting. And did you ever ask her about the robberies?
I did. I asked her what she was doing on Monday and Wednesday morning. Obviously, I wanted to see if she had any alibi that could rule her out as a suspect for the case. She seemed pretty uncomfortable when I asked, but she told me that she was at home alone watching TV on both occasions.
So what did you ask her about next?
Well, I was hoping that there would have been someone who could have actually proven that Ms. Parker was at home, but unfortunately, since there were no witnesses, I wanted to move on, but unfortunately, I actually couldn't ask her anything else. Ms. Parker shut the door on me abruptly and never even asked why I wanted to know about those mornings in the first place.
Were you ever able to search Ms. Parker's home?
I was. I came back later with warrants to search Ms. Parker's home and a warrant for her arrest.
Did you find anything notable there?
Yeah, I actually found multiple things that tied Ms. Parker to both robberies. I found a dark hoodie, jeans, black gloves, which are all things the robber was wearing. I also found the title to the car that she claimed to have sold, but she still owned the title and it was actually still in her name.
So, Detective Kress, after all of this, what was your final conclusion?
Well, after my investigation and everything I've gathered, I think there's no room for doubt that Bronny Parker robbed these banks, and I'm very confident in that decision.
And what made you so confident?
Well, I mean, at some point, you just have to add it up. Ms. Parker has motive. She matches the descriptions given at the crimes. She has a lot of physical items that the robber also had. She doesn't have any verifiable alibi. All of the evidence just adds up, and it all points to Ms. Parker.
Thank you, Detective Kress. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Selnick. Ms. Villette?
Mr. Kress, as the detective investigating this case, wouldn't you agree that Coho City is a pretty safe place that doesn't experience many major crimes?
Yeah, I would say that. It's a pretty quiet town. There's not usually anything this major now.
In fact, this was your first time ever investigating a robbery case, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's correct. That's why it was even more surprising that the robber robbed two banks.
This is actually Cascade County's first robbery case, isn't it?
That I know of, yeah, I believe it is. It's pretty surprising in such a small town.
Let's talk about the robberies. You interviewed each witness in this case separately, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Isn't it true that each witness of the first robbery gave a different physical description of the robber?
Well, it's true that Mr. Connolly, who I also interviewed at the first robbery, did give a slightly different description to what the one that Mr. Parker gave. But as I said, it just seemed like he would probably be less likely to have a good memory.
Move on now. In fact, isn't it true that Johnny Connolly's physical description of the robber was 5 or 6 inches taller than Bronny Parker?
Objection, Your Honor. This statement by Johnny Connolly is hearsay and is inadmissible under Rule 801.
Your response?
Your Honor, under Rule 803(2), excited utterance, the witness was in shock from the event and therefore it is admissible.
Mr. Selnick, anything further?
Yes, Your Honor. Opposing counsel has not laid any foundation showing that Mr. Connolly might have been in a state of excited utterance from the robbery, and so this exception does not apply.
And anything further, Ms. Villette?
I stand by my response earlier.
All right, thank you. I am going to sustain the objection. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Isn't it true that a witness of the second robbery, Christopher Ricci, gave 2 different descriptions of the robber?
It's true that he came back a bit after I first interviewed him, and he told me about the GPS, but also that he might have been wrong about the robber's description, but obviously, as more time passes after a robbery, a witness is more
Thank you,
likely to get
Press.
past
I'd like to
confused.
move on now. You also fully searched the entire scene of both crimes, correct?
Yes, I conducted searches on both crime scenes.
And you spoke to all of the witnesses.
I did speak to all of the witnesses. I wanted to do my job as well as I could.
But you never collected any usable fingerprints for either robbery, correct?
I mean, there were no fingerprints to collect. The robber was wearing gloves.
And there was no video surveillance of either crime, right?
No, as Mr. Baldwin just testified, they were actually deactivated by Mr. Parker himself, or Ms. Parker, pardon me.
And you cannot tell us the license plate of the blue sedan, correct?
No, again, not the witnesses didn't get that, but I do know that Ms. Parker owned a blue sedan that she claimed to have sold, but still had the title.
I'd like to move on now. And you'd agree that a blue sedan is a pretty commonly owned car in Cascade County, wouldn't you?
It's definitely fairly common. It's not a single identifier of a person, but when you add it up with all the other evidence, it definitely points
Thank
to
you, Detective Kress. After the second robbery, you weren't able to locate any witnesses at or around the location where the tracker was dropped, correct?
I mean, it was on the side of the freeway. There weren't any witnesses who saw it get dropped, no.
Let's talk about your search of Bronnie Parker's house. You executed a search warrant to conduct a full comprehensive search, correct?
That's correct. I got my warrant, and then I searched the house.
And you didn't give Bronnie any notice beforehand that you were searching her home, right? That was a surprise.
I'm not aware whether it was a surprise. I know that I came with an arrest, with a warrant both for her arrest and for the search for her home.
My question was, did you give Bronnie any notice beforehand?
No, not that I really had a chance to. I mean, she closed the door on me when I first tried to interview her.
So you had plenty of time to search her house, correct?
I suppose so, yes.
But when you searched Bronnie Parker's house, you didn't find any white sneakers, did you?
No, I didn't find white sneakers, but those are a pretty distinctive item. It would make sense that a robber would dispose of them if
You didn't find a mask?
No, again, that's a pretty distinctive item.
And you didn't find a gun?
No, once again, those things would likely be disposed of, but I did find the other identifiers of the robber, as well as a lot of...
Detective Quest, you didn't find any cash either, correct?
No, but obviously that's what Ms. Parker used to pay off her mortgage.
Switching gears, isn't it true that as a part of your investigation, you wanted to talk with Johnny Connolly about his physical description of the robber?
Sorry, what's exactly the question?
As part of your investigation, isn't it true that you want to speak with Johnny Connolly about his physical description of the robber?
Well, I did speak with him at the crime scene about his description of the robber. I did later think that it could be useful to see if he had any other information to give me, but when it wasn't super easy to track him down, I figured that there was really no point.
But Detective Kress, you couldn't find him, right?
No, like I just said, he wasn't a very easy person to track down, and I figured I wouldn't go on a wild goose chase for someone who'd probably given me all the information.
But you searched for him at his apartment, correct?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
You searched for him at his apartment, correct?
Yeah, I believe I went to his apartment and he wasn't there.
And you searched for him at Jonesville Bank, right?
Yeah, I asked Mr. Baldwin, and he said that he didn't know where Mr. Connolly was at the moment.
You learned that Johnny Connolly stopped going to work a few days after the robbery.
I believe that he did, but again, he'd already given me the information, and again, he was obviously a teller at the time of the robbery, so it's not like he could have committed it.
So, isn't it true that right after the robberies, Johnny Connolly simply could no longer be found?
I suppose you could say that, but again, he was at the crime scene of one of them as a teller. It wouldn't make sense for him to have robbed it.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Detective Kress, could you remind me the witnesses of the first robbery?
Yeah, the witnesses were Mr. Baldwin and Mr. Connolly, and while Mr. Connolly did give me his description and then become a bit harder to track down, Mr. Baldwin's description, which was more reliable in the first place, was the one that I used, and that was the one that matched Ms. Parker.
Thank you. No further questions at this time.
Thank you. Let's take 30 seconds to get caught up on our scoring. Okay, plaintiff's third witness.
The prosecution calls Allie Pinkerton to the stand. Good evening, Ms. Pinkerton.
Good evening.
Would you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Yeah, of course. I'm Allie Pinkerton. I specialize in computer forensics and have been working at the Cascade County Sheriff's Office, or the CCSO, for 7 years now.
And what do you do for the CCSO?
I mostly look into criminals' electronic history and GPS data evidence for cases. I've also appeared in court for cases I may work on before.
You said you specialized in computer forensics. How did you get your job at the CCSO?
Well, I double majored in computer science and physics in college and received my bachelor's degrees in both those fields from Stanford. I've also attended multiple lectures and classes about GPS technology, and I work frequently with that technology for my job at the CCSO.
How did you get into the field of computer sciences and technology?
I've been coding since I was 11, and I actually coded for a social media company before I worked at the CCSO.
Okay, Your Honor, I asked that Ms. Pinkerton be qualified as an expert in the fields of location technology and GPS tracking.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. Hearing none, she is so qualified.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, let's go to the week of the robberies. When did you become involved in the investigation?
I was informed about the first robbery on the 9th, but there were no leads I could follow until the second robbery occurred, when I was officially involved in the investigation.
And what did that look like?
Well, Detective Kress called me on the 11th and told me that there had been a robbery and that a GPS device had been planted on a bag of stolen cash.
Okay, so what was your first step?
Once Detective Kress told me this, I immediately began tracking the device.
So where did you first see the GPS location?
I first saw the GPS device show up traveling north on I-4 towards Row. Around 35 minutes after I started tracking it, it came to a stop at the Zell Avenue exit.
And what did the GPS do once it got to the Zell Avenue exit?
It appeared at first to continue past the exit and down the highway, but it then reappeared at a stop on the exit ramp to its correct position.
Why do you think this was?
The continued movement was likely caused by the the limitations of prediction technology. GPS data is recorded about every second or so. It requires a computer to predict its movements. So once the computer received the new data, it corrected itself and appeared on the ramp.
Well, what do you think happened with the GPS?
The most probable situation is that the robber slowed down on the highway or on the exit ramp, dropped the GPS out of the window, and continued off the highway.
Are there any other possibilities?
Technically, the robber could have thrown it out the window and continued down the highway, but that is highly unlikely. I mean, how far is that throw? And also, I would have seen the GPS skidding along the road as it bounced on the pavement, which it didn't do. It just came to a stop.
And how do you know this information is accurate?
Oh, GPS technology is very reliable. There are 32 GPS satellites orbiting the Earth right now, and a GPS device only needs 4 to accurately pinpoint a location. It's virtually impossible for a receiver to be without 4 satellites, and in fact, devices are even usually connected to around 6 to 10 satellites at a time.
So, based on all the evidence you've reviewed in this case, what is your expert opinion on whether the car took the Zell Avenue exit?
If you add all the evidence up, in my opinion, it is highly likely that the robber took the Zell Avenue exit.
Thank you, Ms. Pinkerton. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions at this time.
Thank you, Cross.
Ms. Pinkerton, as an expert in computer-related things, you would agree that there will almost always be small differences between the receiver's clock and the satellite clock?
Yes, I believe so.
Isn't it also true that GPS satellites are known in some cases to drift in their orbits, leading to errors in the way that we calculate their position here on Earth?
I'm rusty on this exact subject of the physics of it, but I'm sure. Yeah, I suppose so, yes.
In the investigation of Ronnie Parker, it's true that the blue dot on the GPS appeared at a point beyond the exit, yes?
At first, yes, but like I stated, that was caused by prediction technology, and it was correctly appeared on the exit ramp.
And you can't tell us for sure today how it got to the place where Detective Press ultimately found it.
No, I cannot, but I can say that it didn't show any signs of being thrown a far distance, and yeah.
You also can't tell us whether the car carrying the tracker took the exit or kept going down the road, right?
I can't tell you exactly what happened, but based on probability, it's likely that they continued off the highway.
Based on your expertise, criminals often rely on things like social media and text messaging when committing crimes, correct?
Sure, yes, I suppose so.
Bronnie's cell wasn't at the scene when she was arrested, though, right?
I don't believe it was, no.
You'd agree that the only real way to confirm it was Bronnie Parker is through geofence search, correct?
Yes, geoface tracking, which I unfortunately didn't have access to.
And in this case, you weren't able to confirm it was Bronnie Parker.
No, my job was tracking the GPS device.
Wouldn't you agree that we need to be close to as 100% certain as possible when someone is being accused of two serious crimes like armed robbery?
Of course, yes, I do.
That's all my questions. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. Okay, let's take 30 seconds for the judges to get caught up with scoring. All right, is it correct that the prosecution arrests?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. The defense for its witness?
I apologize, Your Honor, for the technical difficulties. The defense calls Ms. Bronnie Parker to the stand. Bronnie, where do you live at the moment?
I live in Dillsville, Oregon.
And where did you grow up?
I actually grew up in Roe, Oregon, and graduated from Hamilton High back in '02.
And what did you do after high school?
I've always had a big passion for music, actually. So I joined a band, but you know how the music business can be. So I stopped playing the bass eventually.
And what happened after your music career?
Well, you know, I went around trying to find odd jobs, and eventually I found one at the community association where I was a landscaper, and I really enjoyed that. And well, that job gave me the opportunity to go to community college and get my associate's degree.
And where did you work after this job?
Due to my associate's degree in computer securities, I was able to get a job at Doing Security Company.
And what types of businesses did you work with the security company?
Local businesses where I would be work with their security team.
And how well do you know one of the businesses you worked at, Coho Community Bank?
Fairly well. I was in charge of their security, and I'm actually a member, and that's the bank where my mortgage is from.
And who did you receive your mortgage from?
The bank's manager, Lolo Baldwin, back in 2018.
And how well do you know Lolo?
I actually know Lolo pretty well professionally, and then when I was getting my mortgage, she really stuck her neck out for me and really helped me through that process, which I'm grateful for.
And when did you say you got your mortgage?
That was in 2018.
Okay. And why were you unable to pay your mortgage for February on to about August?
Well, unfortunately, I lost my job, and some bills just can't get paid during those difficult times.
Were you able to keep your house?
I was. During those spring months, I could keep my house, yes.
And did the bank reach out at all to tell you about your missing payments?
Lolo actually came to my house.
And when did she show up at your house?
That was in late May.
And were you surprised at all by this interaction?
At first, I was, but then I felt reassured. Banks are supposed to take care of you. That's what I believe, and I thought that's what the bank was doing for me.
Mm-hmm. And were you able to pay your mortgage after she visited you then?
Not directly after, but back in August, I restarted paying my mortgage.
And how did you get the money to afford all these payments after?
Eventually, I had to make the difficult decision to sell my car. I didn't want to originally because I live in a food desert, so it's hard for me to get places, but it did come to that. So I posted an ad online on Craigslist, and within an hour, I got a seller.
And who purchased your car?
It was some man that I met online, and he showed up at my house, and it went really quick. And he bought it with small bills, which is, it is what it is. At least I got some sort of income for the first time in a long time.
And what happened during this interaction?
He gave me a bunch of small bills and didn't end up asking for the title, but I just kind of pinned that on. It was just a guy I met on Craigslist, and he went on the ad I posted really quickly. So, yeah.
And what did you end up doing after selling your car?
Well, that was the first time I'd had any sort of money for a long time. So I tried to play my luck at the casino, where I consider myself to be a pretty good player.
And what happened next when you're at the casino?
I played a few thousand, won a few thousand, and I felt good about my winnings.
Did you end up cashing in your winnings?
Yes, and on the 11th, I went back and asked the Pat Hurst to give the teller at the casino to give me a check for the amount my mortgage is for, so I could pay that.
And how much was this check for?
It was like $5,200.
And to confirm, you got this check from the casino after winning?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And how well do you know Pat?
We definitely know each other. I go to the casino where I'm a poker player, and she works there. That's how we know each other.
And did you give the check to the bank?
I did. That was the next day, so it would be August the 12th, 2021. And that was one of the first times in a long time I'd been feeling good about myself.
Yeah. And after paying back what you owed, what happened next?
Well, I went back to my home, and Detective Elliot Kress, or who I now know to be Detective Elliot Kress, showed up and was being very aggressive and making me uncomfortable.
Objection, Your Honor. This statement is prejudicial. They're using the word aggressive, which is clearly a very negative word, in the hopes of swaying the jury. And I would ask that the witness rephrase.
Your response to that objection?
Your Honor, this is Ms. Bronnie Parker's perception of this interaction. Mr. Kress approached her aggressively in this situation, and this is how she perceived it, and this is how this interaction went, in her opinion. So therefore, it's not prejudicial. It is probative of what happened.
Your Honor,
anything further, Mr. You may.
Yes, Your Honor. The witness just stated that they were aggressive as if it were a fact. However, we just heard Mr. Kress testify that they perceived it as non-aggressive. So if they're going to state that the aggressiveness was simply their viewpoint, I would like to ask that they specify as such.
Well, clearly, Mr. Elliott Kress is not going to say that he was aggressive in this situation, but my client here, Ronnie Parker, said that Elliott Kress was aggressive to her in this day and time.
Anything further?
I stand by my previous statement, Your Honor.
I stand by my previous statement, Your Honor.
All right, thank you both for your arguments. The witness is permitted to give her own opinion about what transpired. The fact that this may be prejudicial doesn't run counter to the rules. The rules prohibit the introduction of evidence that is unfairly prejudicial. And I don't think that the objection meets that standard. So I'm going to overrule and you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Ms. Parker, going back a little bit, what happened during this interaction with Detective Elliott Kress?
Well, at first I didn't know that it was Detective Elliott Kress, but I do know that now. And he came to my home. I was a young woman alone, and it was very uncomfortable.
And what happened next after this interaction?
Well, he made a vaguely threatening statement, and it was very uncomfortable.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Cross?
Yes, Your Honor. Good evening, Ms. Parker.
Good evening.
Now, you performed inspections on Cascade Bank when you worked with Duke Security, right?
That's correct. That was my job.
And part of your job was suggesting that new security systems be installed.
Yes, that was something I did frequently.
Okay, so if the bank was installing new cameras, you would have been the one who allowed it.
If you're referring to the bank that Lola Baldwin managed, that sounds like something I could have done. However, for this specific instance, I don't remember doing this, and it doesn't sound like something Lola would have wanted to happen.
Ms. Parker, I'm not asking if it's something you did. I'm asking if the bank was in the process of installing new cameras, you would have been the only one who would have done it, correct?
I wasn't the person who did it this time.
Okay, and early in 2021, you were fired from Duke Security.
I was told that I was let go, yes.
And your employer told you that the reason you were fired was because of claims of embezzlement.
Objection, hearsay.
Your response?
Yes, Your Honor. This is not be used for the truth of the matter asserted, but to show part of Ronnie Parker's motive, specifically to show motive for robbing bank service by a company she used to work for.
Anything further, Ms. Warden?
Your Honor, the statement that she was fired for embezzling money, this statement is not offered for the effect of the listeners, offered for the truth of the matter. This is to show sort of prejudice against my client, Ms. Parker.
And anything further, Mr. Walker?
Yes, Your Honor. As I just stated, it's not being used for truth of the matter asserted. It's being used to show part of Parker's motive.
Yeah, and on that basis, I'm going to overrule the objection. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Let's talk about your mortgage. You stopped paying because you lost your job, Ms. Parker.
Yes.
Okay, and this mortgage for your dream house?
It was. It's my dream house. Still is.
And after you were fired, you knew you only had 1 month of payments for your mortgage left, right?
I knew I had to continue paying my mortgage, yes.
Okay, and after that 1 month, you still didn't have a job?
No, I wasn't able to get a job, no.
Okay, and March, April, and May passed without a single payment being made or you finding a job, correct?
Yes, that's correct. It's a tough market out there.
Okay, and since you were desperate, you sold your car.
I sold my car. That's what I had to do in that time.
Okay, and it was a blue car?
It was a dark blue car.
And it was pretty old too, a 1991 model?
It was. That's what I could afford.
Okay, and you sold this 30-year-old car for roughly $5,000, almost twice its value, right?
Objection, relevance.
Your response?
Yes, Your Honor. We're using this to cast doubt on the fact that a car which has clearly very old was sold for an amount which is twice its value.
Your Honor, the value of said car is not in the affidavit. It is not something that can be assumed from the limited information we have. The price of the car has nothing to do with the fact that Bronnie is here today.
Anything further?
No, Your Honor, I stand by my previous statements.
So as I understand it, the questions that the prosecution is posing about the value of the car really relate to the credibility of the defendant's version of events about the car. So for
That's
that
correct,
reason, I will overrule the objection and you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Parker, you claim you sold this car to a collector on Craigslist, right?
Yes, this was a man that I met online on Craigslist.
And you can't testify to this car having any sort of collectible value?
I'm not a car person, so I don't know that much about cars, but he did.
Okay. And this supposed collector never asked for a title?
No, this was a man I met online. You know, that kind of stuff happens online, but you know, he wanted the car.
Okay. Finally, let's look at August 9th and 11th. You said that you had been home alone on the mornings of both robberies. Is that right?
Yes, and later that afternoon I went to the casino.
Okay. And at the times you say you were at home, nobody saw you at your house?
No, I live alone, so.
So there's nobody to prove that you were at home?
I guess not, but I saw Pat Hurst at the casino later on.
Okay. Ms. Parker, can you testify to going to Kiera's Yogurt and Coffee on the mornings of both robberies?
I guess. Yes.
Ms. Parker, you prepared a signed and sworn affidavit prior to this trial, correct?
That's true.
I would like my co-counsel to start screen sharing Bronnie Parker's affidavit, page 41. Ms. Parker, you just told the court that you went to Kiera's Yogurt and Coffee in the mornings of both robberies, correct?
Yes, my apologies.
Okay, and on page 41, line 18, it says that I didn't know exactly who he was and that I'd been home alone on both Monday and Wednesday mornings.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, co-counsel. Moving on. After the robberies, you went to Chalmers Casino.
Yes.
And when you visited the casinos on the days of the robberies, the money you gave Ms. Hurst were small crumpled bills, correct?
Yes, that would be the money that I got from the car collector.
So that's a yes, small crumpled bills?
Small bills, yes.
And they were in a brown paper bag?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions at this time.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Parker, how did you come about your last mortgage payments, your missed mortgage payments?
Well, I like to think myself as quite the poker player, so I spent the money that I got from the car collector, and I went down to the casino. I took the bus, obviously, since I no longer owned a car, and then I won and had a big winning day.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Let's give the judges 30 seconds to get caught up. All right, the defense's second witness.
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Pat Hurst to the stand. Good evening. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself, Ms. Hurst?
Well, my name is Pat Hurst, and I am 67 years old.
And where do you work at the moment?
At the moment, I work at the Chalmers Casino.
And what's your position there?
Right now, I'm the assistant floor manager, but I started out as a janitor in '95, I believe.
And how long have you worked there?
Since 1995. It's been a while.
And how do you know the defendant, Bronnie Parker?
Well, Bronnie is a regular here at the casino. They come in about once a month, I believe.
So you've seen her there before a few times?
Yeah, all the time. Very good poker player.
Objection, Your Honor. Rule 404, character evidence. Opposing counsel mentioning that Ms. Parker is a good poker player. They're using that statement to show that they will act in accordance, which is inadmissible under Rule 404, character evidence.
Your response, Ms. Warden?
Your Honor, Pat Hurst here perceived Ronnie Parker playing this night well. So therefore it's not character evidence because how she played this night is not something that we assumed based on other nights. It's something that that witness Pat Hurst said happened this night.
Anything further? Is it Ms. Genauer?
Genauer, yes. I stand by my response, mentioning that Miss Parker is a good poker player is character evidence, which they will use to show that they acted in accordance with when they came to gamble.
And anything further, Ms. Warden?
Again, Your Honor, this is not character evidence because how Bronnie Parker played that night was not assumed based on how she played prior nights. How she played that night is how my client, Pat Hurst, perceived Bronnie Parker playing that night. And therefore it's not character evidence.
Okay, I agree that it's not character evidence and it doesn't raise a negative character inference. So I'm going to overrule the objection. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Do you remember Bronnie coming in on August 9th?
Yes, I believe that she came in at around 4:30.
And what was she wearing during this time?
I believe she was just wearing jeans, normal casino attire for Bronnie.
And how much did she win that night?
Just under, I believe, possibly just under $3,000.
And were you working on August 11th?
I was, yes.
Did you see Bronnie at all then?
I did, yes. I remember it a little more clearly. She came in at around 12:30-ish.
And how much did she win that afternoon?
A lot more, just under $5,000.
And did she cash out at all?
Yes, she asked me to write a check to the Chalmers Casino, or to the bank, sorry, for the amount that she owed. She gave me the rest in cash.
Okay. And how was Bronnie feeling after that afternoon?
I mean, just normal Bronnie. I think I didn't notice anything out of the ordinary.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Cross.
Yes, Your Honor. 1 minute. Okay. Hello, Miss Hurst.
Hello.
I'd like to talk a little bit about the money that Miss Parker played with at the casino on the days of the robberies. It was thousands more than she usually plays with, right?
She told me that she just sold her car, so it made sense.
But it was thousands more than usual, right?
Yes, you could say that.
And it was in small bills, correct?
It was. She told me that the person that she sold her car to was a collector.
And it was wadded up in a brown paper bag, right?
I believe it was, yes.
So just to get this straight, after what you now know to be 2 bank robberies, Miss Parker came in to gamble with thousands of dollars in small bills, wadded up in a brown paper bag. Did I get that right?
Yes, she just sold her car, so it did make sense at the time, yes.
Okay. Earlier during the trial, you heard Lolo Baldwin testify to the robber wearing blue jeans and a dark hoodie to the robberies, correct?
Yes, sure.
And when Miss Parker came in to gamble on the 11th, she was wearing blue jeans and a dark hoodie, right?
Yes, but those aren't necessarily out of the ordinary clothes for Bronnie. Those were what she would normally wear to the casino.
But nonetheless, she was wearing blue jeans and a dark hoodie, correct?
Yes, she was.
And when Miss Parker finished playing on the 11th, she asked you to write a check to her bank for a very specific amount of money.
Yes, the amount that she owed.
Yeah, $5,212.14, correct?
Yes, that is how much I wrote the check out to.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hurst. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Any redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll take 30 seconds for all of us to get caught up with our scoring sheets. All right, the defense's third witness,
Your Honor, the defense would like to call Dolray Mapp to the stand.
Okay, go ahead.
Could you state your name for me, please?
I'm Dolray Mapp.
And where do you currently live?
I live in Coho City, Oregon.
And what do you do for work?
I work as a private investigator.
Could you tell me a little bit about yourself, please, Ms. Mapp?
Yeah, I went to the University of Oregon, and there I studied criminal justice. Upon my graduation in 1999, I got a job working as a graphic designer for MapQuest. I was released from that job in 2001, but that was a blessing in disguise, really, because I found my true calling, and that was being a private investigator. I opened my own agency, and I've worked there ever since.
And what were you asked to do for this case?
I was asked to review the location of Bronnie Parker on the dates of and around the robberies.
When did you start doing GPS location tracking?
It comes up in my work quite frequently. I've been doing it for many years.
So how long exactly would you say you've been doing it for?
I've been doing it for over 6 years.
Your Honor, I would like to qualify Dolray Mapp as an expert witness in GPS location tracking.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, she's still qualified. Go ahead.
Ms. Dolray, can you explain to the jury how GPS tracking works?
Well, a device emits a signal, and in this instance, Google can track that signal and where it came from.
And what was the first thing you realized and looked into in Ms. Parker's case?
I looked into whether Bronnie Parker had a cell phone or not, and she does. She has an Android cell phone.
How did this help your investigation?
Well, an Android cell phone is automatically connected to a Google account, and Google tracks your location information.
Your Honor, may my co-counsel screen share Exhibit 5?
Yes.
Ms. Dolray, I'd like to show you what has been marked as Exhibit 5. Does this look like an accurate representation of the data you collected?
Yes, it does.
And what days are on here?
August 8th.
Objection, Your Honor. I don't believe this has been previously entered into evidence, and as such, I would like to ask that opposing counsel do that before they continue with their direct.
Your response?
Your Honor, I'm laying a foundation before I enter it in as evidence.
Anything further?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. You may proceed, Ms. Garahan.
What days are on here, Ms. Mapp?
August 8th, 2021, August 9th, 2021, August 11th, 2021, and August 12th, 2021.
And what did you conclude from this data?
From this data, I concluded that Bronnie Parker's device did not send a signal anywhere near the robberies on the dates of the robberies.
Your Honor, we would like to offer in Exhibit 5's evidence as authenticity has been simulated.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
It's received.
And Ms. Mapp, have you had a chance to talk to Detective Kress yet?
Yes.
And how did he respond to you?
He gave me the impression that he did not value my contribution to the investigation.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Cross.
Yes, Your Honor. Good evening, Ms. Mapp.
Good evening.
Now, you have said that location tracking technology isn't foolproof, right?
Yes, but it is generally very reliable.
So that's a yes, it isn't foolproof?
Yes.
And even if it worked perfectly, Mr. Parker could have just turned off their phone, right?
Yeah, I would find that very unlikely.
Why is that?
Because in my expert opinion, Bronnie told me that Bronnie always has their phone on them.
Okay, but can you testify to Mr. Parker telling anyone else that?
No, not exactly.
So you have no evidence of that other than their word?
You could say that, but I find it highly unlikely that Bronnie would have not had their phone on and on them.
Okay, but they could have also just turned off their phone's location services.
Yes, but Google makes it very difficult to regulate privacy settings.
All right, and it's also possible that they just didn't connect to any Google services at the time of the robberies.
It's very unlikely, in my expert opinion.
But it's possible.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so if you add it up, based on your expertise, it's possible that Mr. Parker, who's well-versed in computers, would have known about these loopholes as well.
I guess you could say that, but again, I find it very unlikely.
But that's a yes, it's possible.
Theoretically.
Okay. On direct, you talked about a map you made of Mr. Parker's location data, right?
Yeah, that is correct.
Your Honor, I'm now bringing forth Exhibit 5. My co-counsel will screen share it. All right. Now, this map shows time and locations where Parker was present, right?
Yes.
And Ms. Mapp, you just heard Mr. Parker testify that they were, or Ms. Parker that testified they were home alone on both days of the robberies, right?
Yes.
And they said that they couldn't testify to going to Kiara's Yogurt and Coffee?
Yeah.
However, your map clearly shows that they were at Kiara's Yogurt and Coffee on the mornings of both robberies.
Yes.
Additionally, the device's location on August 9th at 9 o'clock, the time of the robbery, is not shown, correct?
Correct.
In fact, there's nothing after 8:05.
Yeah.
So, based on the evidence that you just presented to the court, Ms. Parker has no alibi at the time of the robbery on the 9th.
Well, that's not entirely true because the device that she always has showed information about its location. So,
But there was no information at the time of the robbery,
I guess that's true.
which means, based off of this evidence, Ms. Parker has no alibi.
I guess that's true.
Thank you, Ms. Mapp. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions at this time.
Any further redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Does the defendant now rest?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. I'll give the judges 30 seconds to get caught up. All right, plaintiff's closing argument.
Yes, Your Honor. May I begin?
You may.
Added up, Ms. Parker was desperate. Desperate to save everything they had ever worked towards. Desperate to save their home, their American dream. But Ms. Parker was also a gambler, and they were willing to gamble their way out. They were willing to gamble years in jail for their home. Why? They had all the cards laid out for them. Their knowledge of the bank's security system, their friends Lolo Baldwin and Pat Hurst, and their knowledge of the banks to rob them both at gunpoint. Ms. Parker was out of options. They were over 5 months behind on their mortgage payments. She owed over $5,000 to the Cascade Community Bank. And because she was fired from her previous job and was unable to get a new one, there was simply no way for her to get the money she owed before losing her home. The defense has claimed that Ms. Parker had another option, that they sold their car. But Ms. Parker testified that even she was surprised when they got $5,000 for her 30-year-old Lincoln Town Car. Ms. Parker, despite denying it, knew about the foreclosure that was happening just days after the robberies, and one day before she paid off her mortgage. She had a friend at the bank, Lolo Baldwin. Ms. Parker took advantage of Mr. Baldwin. being able to push out the foreclosure dates until August. Conveniently, when the bank was replacing their security cameras, the banks were robbed. And you've heard that it's Ms. Parker herself who scheduled the replacement. She took advantage of that. She took advantage of knowing how much money was behind the counters from her job at doing security. The first robbery occurred on the 9th at the Dillsville branch of the Cascade Community Bank. You've seen how Detective Kress responded to the call. As soon as he got onto the scene, he interviewed Mr. Baldwin and Johnny Connolly. Mr. Baldwin's description was far more reliable, as you heard from Detective Kress. You have also heard how that description matches Bronnie Parker. The robber was wearing gloves, a white t-shirt, and jeans, the very same outfit that Ms. Hurst testified to seeing Ms. Parker wearing at Chalmers Casino. The very same clothes Detective Kress found in Ms. Parker's home. Another robbery occurred on the 11th, but this time bank teller Chris Perucci slipped a tracker into a bag of money. You've heard how the robber dropped the GPS at the Zell Avenue exit, which led directly to Chalmers Casino, where Ms. Parker testified to visiting just hours after both the robberies. Ms. Parker brought in the cash to Ms. Hurst in a brown paper bag and paid them in small bills in the same amounts the robber stole. But it wasn't until Ms. Parker paid their mortgage off that Lolo Baldwin added it up. He was the first one to suspect Ms. Parker, but as Detective Kress went to investigate, he added it up too. 2 eyewitness accounts that matched Mr. Parker. The foreclosure looming over her. No alibi besides their own word, but Dolray Mapp, the defense's own witness, proved that to be false. The car title still in her name, Ms. Parker's defensiveness during Detective Kress's questioning, and the GPS dropped on an exit ramp leading directly to Chalmers Casino. This evidence means almost nothing alone, but together, it proves beyond a reasonable doubt that Ms. Parker robbed 2 banks. In order to prove Ms. Parker's guilt, we, the prosecution, had to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that they robbed 2 banks. We have shown you the desperation to save everything she had ever worked towards. You've heard how Ms. Parker took advantage of every opportunity, of her friends, and of her previous job. You've seen the trail she left, and we have shown you that all the evidence adds up. This is why we are confident that after hearing all of the facts and evidence in court today, you will find Bronnie Parker guilty on 2 accounts of robbery in the 1st degree. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McKenzie. Ms. Garahan for the defense.
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor and members of the jury, we told you at the beginning that Ms. Parker's case was an example of the prosecution rushing to judgment. This is a case of mistaken identity, and Ms. Parker should be found not guilty for robbery in the 1st degree. The evidence you have seen today has shown that the prosecution has failed to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Ms. Parker committed this crime. As you've heard from the testimony of Lolo Baldwin and Pat Hurst, Ms. Parker is a kind and honest person. And as you can see now, the prosecution is using her past against her. Ms. Parker has always struggled with money a little, but before the robbery, she had a stable job at the security company and was working her way up to enough money to afford a house. Just because the day that the first robbery took place happens to be the same day that the cameras were scheduled to be upgraded does not prove that Ms. Parker was the one to rob either of the banks. Once again, the prosecution is pinning these robberies on Ms. Parker because she's poor and happened to be struggling with money at this certain point in time. People are late with their mortgages all the time. And when Ms. Parker came into the bank with a check with the money that she owed, only then does Mr. Baldwin actually think it could have possibly been Ms. Parker who committed these crimes. And when he was describing Ms. Parker to Detective Kress, she never once thought that it was her. No other suspects were ever considered or investigated. And I wonder how many people in Coho, the state, and even the country own a black sweatshirt. I bet it's a lot. Definitely too many to go through everyone's closet. At the end of the day, the black sweatshirt and the rest of the clothing worn is a meaningless identifier. It proves nothing. Ms. Pinkerton then tells us many times that the GPS system she chose to use is not 100% perfect, and that the tracking device was moving, which makes it even more complicated to track because of how misleading it can be. Why should we trust someone's word about where the bag of money was, who doesn't even know if their own system is completely accurate? The prosecution's case is a house of cards. It is one weak and faulty piece of evidence upon another. The prosecution has not produced one piece of conclusive evidence connecting Ms. Parker to these crimes. Your Honor and members of the jury, the prosecution has not met its burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Garahan. I think the prosecution has a little bit of time on the clock for rebuttal if you want it.
Yes. May I ask the timekeepers how much time I have remaining?
30 seconds.
Okay. May I begin?
You may.
We are not asking you to look at individual pieces of evidence. We are asking you to add up the evidence. The car title still in Ms. Parker's name. The exit ramp leading to Chalmers Casino. The banks that Ms. Parker worked at were robbed. The foreclosure looming over them. 2 eyewitness accounts matching Bronnie Parker. We are pointing out the evidence adds up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll give our judges a little bit of time to get caught up, and I'll ask the teams to please meet or well, let's start first. While the judges are doing your scoring, let me ask the teams this. Are there any rule violations? So for TI, any rule violations?
No, Your Honor.
And for SV, any rule violations?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you very much. All right, now we'll ask the teams to gather and meet to discuss who you want to elect from your opposing team for best attorney performance and best witness performance. And let's take a couple of minutes to do that. Judges, we can all get caught up on our scoring sheets, and we will reconvene in, let's say, 2 minutes.